as we go through the presentation, when we go through the case study and the live demo and so on, if you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them into the questions area of GoToWebinar. And that way, if you have questions for Terry, we can queue those up and ask Terry at the end in the Q&A section. If you have any questions for the Meraki team, we have several members of the Meraki team here on the line, and they're waiting for your questions, so go ahead and ask at any time, and we'll take care of those as they come in. And then when we do get to the Q&A, not only will we have questions for Terry, but we can also ask general questions and answer them for the rest of the audience. Now, before we dive into the first topic here, there are a couple of items of logistics to cover. And the first is a quick one-question poll, very short, that I'm about to launch right now. And we'd really appreciate it if you give us a little bit of information on how you first heard about Cisco Meraki. And I'm going to leave it open for a few moments because there are plenty of people on the line, and we want to give everyone the opportunity to enter their selection and vote in the poll. And I've noticed that many of you have already voted, so thanks very much for entering that. But I'll go ahead and leave it open just for a little bit more to give everyone that last chance. Great. Thank you very much for giving us that little bit of input. The other item of logistics is actually pretty exciting, and that's that we are offering free access points to the qualified IT professionals that are on the line here today. This is a Cisco Meraki AP, similar to the one that you see there on the screen. It comes with a 3-year license to our cloud management. It's yours to keep. You can take it home. You can get it up and running in about 10 minutes or so, and you'll then have the full experience of the Meraki hardware. You'll be able to connect to the Wi-Fi AP and see how it works for yourself. Of course, you'll also be looking at and using the Meraki dashboard, which we will show you later on during the demo. Now, we do ask that you please give us a quick telephone call so that we can confirm the shipping information we have on file for you. And if you can't quite remember who to call, you'll find the contact information for your Meraki rep in the reminder email that you received before the start of today's webinar. So with that, let's go ahead and start off with a little bit about Cisco Meraki and Cisco Cloud Networking. Now, Cisco Meraki is a complete cloud-managed networking solution that includes Wi-Fi, switching, security, and MDM, all of which is centrally managed over the web. And it's designed and built by the Cisco Meraki team from the ground up for cloud management. And that really means it brings the benefits of the cloud to networks, and it does that through an integrated solution that includes hardware, software, and cloud services. Now, Meraki is a leader in cloud network. We're seeing over 100% annual revenue growth. In fact, we've been operating in the cloud since 2006. And over the years, we've been recognized for our innovation, not only by our customers, but also by outside organizations like CRN, InfoWorld, and Gartner through their Magic Quadrant for wired and wireless LAN infrastructure. Now, of course, we are trusted by thousands of customers around the world. Of course, the focus and feature for today is Memphis Zoo. You'll see other city and state and local government organizations, as well as some hospitality and other firms that you see here. If you see any that are here that you find interesting, or if you go to our website, to meraki.cisco.com, and you click on deployment stories and browse some of the deployment stories that are featured there, let us know, and we can set up a reference call if you'd like to talk to any of those folks there. Now, before we dive into the case study and the feature for today with the Memphis Zoo, I'd like to spend just a little bit of time introducing the cloud networking architecture so that when we show it through the dashboard and when Terry talks about how it enabled some of the aspects of mobility, we have a good background and understanding of how things work behind the scenes, at least at a high level. Now, this is a look at the architecture in terms of the diagram and where devices are deployed and how the cloud fits in. Now, of course, end users connect to Wi-Fi through wireless APs or through switches, through the Ethernet network, and they connect to Meraki infrastructure that's deployed on site. Of course, this is at the zoo, or it could be at a branch office or a chain of retail stores. And those Meraki devices are connected back to the cloud through a thin and secure link over which management and configuration data is exchanged. And if you have one site or if you have hundreds of sites, the network administrator can connect to all of those through the Meraki dashboard, and it's that system that enables the centralized management and control through the Meraki dashboard that's enabled really by this architecture. Now we've designed and built this architecture over the past several years to really bring the benefits of the cloud to network. And I mentioned this earlier, and I'm sure you're familiar with the cloud and other aspects of IT. There are a few things to keep in mind that are very important with any cloud solution in IT. And those are principally security, scalability, and reliability. Now security is definitely very important, top of mind for many, many folks. So a few things to note here. One is that there's no user traffic that passes through the cloud. It's only management and configuration data that goes between the Meraki devices and the Meraki cloud. That's what's shown on the left by that arrow in blue. We've also integrated some pretty robust security tools into the system, things like two-factor authentication, account security protections, role-based administration, and change management, all of which together enable us to be deployed in secure environments. In fact, we're even PCI Level 1 certified. That's the highest level of PCI certification. Now, another important aspect to cloud solutions is scalability. And with the Meraki system, it's very easy to scale your environment and your network and capacity as you need to. Because when you decide that you want to add more capacity, you simply add a device like an access point, you plug it in and turn it on, it automatically connects to the Meraki cloud, it registers and downloads its configuration, and it appears in your dashboard ready and as part of the rest of the network that you already have. Or if you're adding a new site entirely, maybe a new branch office or a new location, then you can send out a security appliance, have someone who's not a networking expert plug it into the LAN, plug it into the WAN, and it'll work the same way. It'll connect automatically to the cloud, it'll provision itself, it'll apply the security settings that you've configured in the dashboard, and you'll be up and running. And last but definitely not least is reliability, because the network is something that organizations need to be able to rely on. We've designed the system for very high reliability and uptime, including a 4 nines uptime SLA, and we enable that through a host of technologies that are built into the system, part of which are the multiple data centers that are distributed around the world that really enable that highly available cloud. They include things like data syncing and backups and network configuration and replication across those data centers. And it's also important to point out that the network still continues to function even if the connection to the cloud is interrupted. So if that link on the left in blue is interrupted for whatever reason, then the local network will still continue to work. Users will still be able to connect to the guest Wi-Fi, they'll still be able to print, they'll still be able to use file sharing servers, and the only thing that would be temporarily unavailable to the network administrator would be the ability to perform live monitoring or the ability to change the configuration in that time. Now, if you have any questions about the architecture, any of the aspects that we're covering here, or some of the things that we just showed in the slide before, just go ahead and ask in the questions area and we'll be happy to go over those. There's also a link at the bottom of the page there where you can find more information about the cloud architecture, its reliability, its security, and so on. Now, cloud management is built into all the Cisco Meraki products. We'll really focus on the Wi-Fi solution and how it enables mobility at the Memphis Zoo. But a lot of the aspects that we'll talk about, and even the ones that we show in the dashboard demo, really apply across all the product lines. And these include Wi-Fi and switching at the access layer, also aggregation switches, and up to security appliances with the M security appliance, and down to devices with our cloud-based MDM called Systems Manager. All these parts of the network and even those managed devices are monitored and managed through the Cisco Meraki dashboard. So with that, I'd like to welcome Terry Buckler, IT Manager at Memphis Zoo once again. And first of all, Terry, I want to say thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing a little bit about your experience with Meraki at Memphis Zoo and specifically how you enabled mobility through cloud networking there.
Thank you for having me, and it is my pleasure to pass on the the good feelings I have about Meraki and the network, and they've been able to let me get accomplished here.
Thank you, Terry. Why don't we start off just by giving us a little bit of background about your role at Memphis Zoo and a little bit about the IT organization there.
Well, when I came here in 2008, the IT here was actually outsourced from a local company, and they decided to go in-house and brought me in. Our responsibilities were just pretty much anything that plugged in, IT needed to fix it and make it work. We evolved to taking ownership of a lot more of the software and hardware. I mean, departments would go buy their own laptops, and then they would ask us to make it work. We ended all that. We said, no, we're going to do IT. We're going to do it right. We're going to bring it into an IT house here at the Memphis Zoo. And with that, I started increasing my staff a little bit and was able to, we started out with the second person, and as we started bringing more, like I said, in-house, we brought in a third. So as we grow now, we're going to probably be expanding to a fourth, hopefully within the next year.
So you're in charge of all of IT. That's not only networking, but that's kind of the user devices that people use.
I do every bit of it. I'm responsible for it all at this point. Are we still connected?
Hi, Terry. Are you still there?
I'm here now. I don't know what happened. Everything just went out for a minute.
Okay, our apologies. Looks like there was an audio glitch, but it seems like we're back on track. So just to restart it, and I'm not sure if the audience was able to hear that. So if you could recap a little bit about the Memphis Zoo, its footprint, types of and amount of visitors it has, and so on.
Yeah, we cover about 76 acres. Have probably about 20 different buildings here that house the animals, as well as staff, to take care of the animals. 170 or so regular full-time employees. We get up to around 250 during the different times of the year. A perfect example is right now Zoo Lights is our big Christmas thing, so we hire seasonal employees to help cover the additional hours at the zoo for that. This past year we did set an attendance record. We had 1.1, actually we're just under 1.2 million visitors. So we were very excited about that, up from 936,000. So it's quite an improvement for us. So it has been making some challenges here in IT to help us grow like this.
I can imagine.
Yes.
So you joined a few years ago, and you were mentioning when you were giving us a background that you really had to revamp IT in general, and as part of that, it included things like the employee devices and, of course, Wi-Fi. So can you tell us a little bit about what you found when you were looking for Wi-Fi and what you needed when you were evaluating that?
Well, what we were looking at, some of the things that got brought up were setting up like remote kiosk. One of the early things people came to me, like the head of retail and all, is how can we set up a kiosk, out by this venue at Teton Trek that we just built, which is our grizzly bear exhibit, and things. And I'm like, right now there's no networking out there, and the only way we're going to be able to accomplish that is through wireless. Some of the other things that we started talking about, the ability to have digital signage in the zoo. And again, I'm like, if you really want to do that, we need to do it right. So we're going to have a means of networking to run our signs. And I talked to the CEO, who I answer to, and I said, look, I really want to do this right. We need to take a hard look at putting a Wi-Fi mesh over the zoo. Let's just don't go out and buy, a cheesy little router here or a router over there and make something work. Let's get a solution in here. And, it's always good for an IT person when the uppers buy off on that and say, yeah, that does make sense. That's what we need to do. And so I just started pursuing, possibilities. So we had prior to my employment, they had one company come in and given them a bid. And so I'm like, yeah, let me look around and shop around and see what I can find. And about that time, Meraki just I happened to get an email and said, hey, you ever heard of Meraki? You want to look at it? And I was like, well, I'm in that kind of market right now, and it's what I want to do here. So let's see what it's got. Let's see what it can do. And that's when I brought him in to evaluate.
Great. And as you looked at that and eventually selected Meraki, can you talk a little bit about some of the benefits that you saw and were actually able to deploy? And then I'd like to talk about the ways that you specifically address some of these application needs that you mentioned before.
Well, immediately I saw the ease of deploying. I was given, I got 4 on a trial basis for the MR58s and set them up at a couple of different locations just to see how one would feed the other, get an idea of distance, line of sight, and how good of a signal I could pick up. And it just went from there. Like I said, when I went into the cloud, saw that I don't have to go to each device. Everything that I'm configuring is dropping down to each one. It just made it so easy and so sweet, and we got everything we needed. At the initial was only using our main network. I wasn't VLANing through them or anything. I was only doing my main Memphis Zoo backbone because that was my concern at the time, and seeing how well I could get that accomplished. And like I said, with just the 4 test Merakis, I was sold that I had the right solution. And everything between where my administrative office is to Teton Trek, I could connect in wirelessly and do the first things that were asked just flawlessly. Like I said, I was sold right there.
Sounds like a pretty fantastic vision that you had, and then you were able to see how the Meraki solution could realize that. In terms of that deployment and that, I guess, the setup of the infrastructure, you mentioned evaluating MR58s. For those on the line who are not familiar, that's an outdoor access point. And it looks like you have a mix of indoor and outdoor APs and some switches, too. Could you talk a little bit about where you ended up with that deployment?
Yeah. So after we saw that we were going to be able to accomplish some things, then your mind needs to take over. And we said, okay, now that we know we're going to have a solid Wi-Fi mesh, what can we do with it? Why limit ourselves just to connecting, an outdoor sales point over here or over there? And one of the things we were starting to look at now at about this time was a mobile app. And initially it looked like it was going to be strictly for the iPhone. And I got to talking with them, and I said, the iPhones are nice and they'll go wireless, but what about other devices that aren't necessarily 3G but that are wireless that we could put this app on? And so that's when we expanded and went ahead and completed the mesh. The mesh literally, unfortunately, I hate to say, we're not yet quite finished. We cover right now a little bit better than 80% of our zoo under the mesh, and just the priorities haven't been there on the few remaining spots that aren't covered yet, but we do have the points to bring those in. So at the same time, you get the concept of a mesh, and now you've got an app that can follow you around the zoo. I thought, well, why stop on the outdoors? What happens when they go inside an exhibit, such as our herpetarium? You got cement walls, metal piping, everything that can interfere with any kind of Wi-Fi trying to penetrate. So that's when we took the next step and said, all right, let's start putting indoor points in. So as you walk from the outside into an indoor exhibit, you're still on the mesh. Everything is still going to work for you. You're never going to drop Wi-Fi here. So, which is the goal of that part of it. And once we got to there, then it's like, well, why don't we run not only our VLAN off of it, let's let our photography people, now they can set up at multiple stops taking pictures, and they can create different atmospheres for photographs now all over the zoo, and wirelessly shooting those pictures back up to their VLAN to their photo booth up front where you pay and get your picture as you're exiting. So like I said, we just started to open our minds. What more can we do? It's not what did we want, it's what can we do. And we also have started into the digital signage, like I was saying. We literally have an 80-inch outdoor TV that we use a product called Scala, which allows us to create playlists, video, audio, slideshows, and it connects to that TV wirelessly. So anytime we want to change what's on that sign, our marketing department strictly goes in to the software, makes a change, and wirelessly it gets downloaded to that TV in less than a minute. Their change is up on the sign. So it's speeding several things.
It sounds like some pretty exciting applications that you have going there. In fact, you mentioned one of them, and I'd like to just keep going on that one. We'll jump around here in the slides if you don't mind, but that's the
okay.
The application that you mentioned that was initially thought of for iPhones, and then you realize that folks might have other types of devices. Can you talk a little bit about what people might use that app for?
This app literally will, if you look at the picture on the far left of your screen where it says Zoo Map, it will literally it's a map of the zoo that shows you, when you got your locator on, that you can follow yourself through the whole zoo. And it'll lay it out where you are, what exhibits you're about to be around. You can go in and schedule events, and it'll let you know that, hey, a sea lion show is going to start in 15 minutes. So if you're interested in seeing that, it's time to start walking to Northwest Passage, which, again, you can go right back to the map, see where you are, see where it is, and follow the path to get there to see the show. We haven't activated the photo booth piece of it yet, but I think that's still in the works with marketing and our web pages and things like that. So right now, that's the main focus of our app.
That's pretty exciting to be able to find out right on your iPhone that there's an exciting exhibit or show that's about to happen around the corner, or maybe on the other side of the park.
Right.
You also mentioned a little bit about the digital signage earlier, and I'd just like to go over here and talk about that, as well as some other aspects of operations that go beyond things that maybe people see day to day as they visit and are part of the exhibits. There are also, of course, things going on behind the scenes that visitors don't necessarily realize at the outset.
Yeah. Well, I've already talked about the 80-inch outdoor TV, and we're also in the process of installing 3 more screens at our front gate, which will list our ticket prices, what venues are open and closed for the day, and things like that. So it's sort of the same application, but we're just going to be using more and more of it. going to the top item on this page, the animal health tracking software, TRACS as it's known, we had about 3 various pieces of software that one piece of the zoo may use and another piece didn't. And we finally located this TRACS software that would be all-encompassing of everything we were doing as far as our veterinarians being able to document the records and our nutrition center being able to key into diets, and so when the keepers log in, they can see diet specific to that animal for that day. You know, if anything has changed, they in turn can go back in and log, you know, what the animal's behavior was for the day, how they reacted to the diet change, and things like that. And if you can imagine, this zoo was built in 1906. So a lot of these animal night houses are very old structures that, again, concrete walls, and the only thing going in is old, buried 25 and 50 pair phone lines. So our challenge was, again, how do we get to where these keepers right there at their night house where they're feeding these animals can enter their data, that they don't have to leave and walk, you know, 200-300 yards to the first available and remember to put in all their data.
Right.
So that's where, again, the Wi-Fi mesh comes into play, because we now are deploying small tablets that connect back in and open up that application through Wi-Fi, so they're literally walking in with a tablet, doing what they need to do, and keying in their data on the spot as they've done whatever it is they had to do that day for the animal. So it's given us a more real-time data input for our animal care.
Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting to be able to really to make those animal trainers and doctors more efficient in their care, really, of those animals. You mentioned earlier about the photography booth, the photo booth, and how you were able to separate or give them access to their VLAN so that they could send photos back to the kiosk. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the other vendors that you are supporting in the zoo and how the network enables that?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the best one. Well, I say the best one. The easiest one is the top one, Living Exhibits. We just did a seasonal exhibit this year, and we're going to do it again next year, of a stingray exhibit where you can actually walk in and pet and feed stingrays. And there's also some small little bamboo sharks and others that you can pet in the water. Not long after the exhibit opened, you know, they came to me and they said, you know, we just need network access so, you know, we can email data. Living Exhibits is a third-party vendor, so they said we need to be able to, you know, email reports and stuff back to our headquarters down in Florida, things like that. So it was so easy to go into the cloud and say, okay, I need another SSID. I want to give it WPA PSK security. Bam, went down there, said, here's your password. You know, connect your iPad and laptop. They had both down there, and you know, within 10 minutes, they were on their own VLAN, sending their emails out to their home quarters in Florida. So it just worked really smooth. And the next challenge was just given me today. Lancers just came to me and said, we put up a temporary ice rink every year. And they put up some food carts where they sell hot chocolate and funnel cakes and, you know, cold weather comfort food. And they now want to be able to accept credit cards. And again, just today they came to me and they said, you know, I've got the credit card swipe. Can we see if we can make it work out here? And as soon as I get on off this phone call, that's what I'll be setting up, is making sure their VLAN is in the cloud, and then just configuring the password into the credit card swipe, and I don't foresee more than 15 minutes, and they'll be ready to accept credit cards down at this temporary location. Again, on their own network, so they don't have to worry about my data. I don't have to worry about theirs.
Yeah, pretty important with really any type of environment that's setting up some transactions.
Yep.
Terry, you've talked about quite a few projects. I think it's kind of easy to forget that you still have a limited staff. Maybe if you could just summarize a little bit of what you've been able to do in terms of the network and how you can use this flexibility and ability to focus on some future projects.
Well, you know, like I say, because it is so easy for me to now to be able to go in and not have to worry about the network side of it. I mean, Meraki has proven itself that it is going to work. So all I have to do now is open up my mind and how I want to make, again, the Lancer credit cards to work. I can now just focus strictly on that. I don't even have to think, is Meraki going to have a problem? Is it going to be able to handle it? So I can go straight in and dive in and do what I need to do to get my pieces working and not worry about whether or not the backbone of the network is going to handle it. It's a given. It's there. So
that's great to hear, Terry. And what do you have in mind for the future? Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're thinking of that might be coming next?
Well, I'm in the middle of, and unfortunately, as you know, I've already said, with a small staff, and hopefully people have an understanding of how busy we can be here with 3 people. Right now, I've started a deployment of the Meraki switches. I had identified that we had some very old and aging HP switches that were going bad. We were having network issues. And, I mean, I shopped around. I looked at Dell. I looked at Cisco. And when I heard that Meraki now had these smaller switches, you know, I was like, okay, let's look at that. I mean, their Wi-Fi points are working so beautifully. Why would I want anything else to run my network? So we obviously, you know, met with the Cisco reps here and, you know, worked out a solution. And we are slowly but surely having the time to deploy these switches, you know, as necessary. And because of the cloud solution and the switches that we're putting in, I've been doing a lot of reading about the problems of, you know, the bring your own device, BYOD. That's going to be every IT manager's challenge, you know, as we start to expand. And everything I've read and seen so far, you know, I think we've got the right infrastructure with Meraki that, again, that piece of it is the mind is already at ease. I don't have to worry. I just got to figure out how and what conditions I want to put on these devices, even the considerations of not allowing them on property except for my visitors. But, you know, we have to cross that bridge when we get there. So.
Sure, that makes sense. And thank you for giving us a little bit of insight into what you have in store for the future, and including the network deployment, but also managing devices and BYOD. And thanks for sharing that, and thanks for sharing all that about your deployment. You know, what I'd like to do now is switch over to the dashboard and show a few things about your network. We've been getting some questions over the Q&A regarding your configuration and things like how much uplink bandwidth you have and so on. So maybe what we can do is go into your dashboard, and it looks like I was timed out, but I'll log in again. And actually go over some of the configuration as well as some of the aspects of the usage and the number of clients in the environment. So just to give everyone an introduction to the view we're looking at here, this is an overview of the Memphis Zoo wireless network. You can see here a few very important things about the environment, such as how many clients connected in the past day, how much bandwidth they transferred. You can see to the right graph indicating that bandwidth usage over the past week. naturally goes up and down depending on day and night and weekend patterns. And below is a built-in Google map that shows the locations of different areas of the zoo and where the access points might be located. And these are a mix of indoor APs, outdoor APs. The numbers inside indicate how many clients recently connected to each of those. And a little bit later on in the demo, we can see a little bit more granular information about that connectivity and that user engagement through some built-in location analytics, which is called Presence. But maybe before we dive into the infrastructure and monitoring, there were a few questions about the SSID configuration. So I'd like to start off there and just have a look at the SSIDs. And Terry, if you wouldn't mind just explaining what you've set up here in terms of those SSIDs.
Well, just again, I based my SSIDs strictly on how I was going to label my particular VLANs here and who I wanted to be able to touch what. So again, right now I have 6 VLANs on my network, so that's what each is represented here. For us to be able to accept credit cards through the wireless, again, we had to use the WPA2 PSK. That is a requirement. Obviously, public Wi-Fi, is open. I mean, people come in from the public. I don't have to dole out a password to those. And then, again, the rest, IP phone, that's actually, that exists because one of the future projects, again, some of our night houses don't even have phone lines to them, so we are looking at wireless voice over IP phones. So, and because I do already, within my switches, segment out my IP phone, that's why I have the VLAN for it, so that gives me the future expandability to go wireless with my IP phones. And again, Commons is one of our third parties. Living Exhibits is our third party, and as you can see, I actually already have Lancers in. Again, they're the ones I'm going to be setting up their credit card swipe, their wireless credit card swipe later this afternoon. So, I just based my SSIDs based on my VLANing and segmentation of my network.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Terry. And we've had a few questions about the SSID usage, the bandwidth usage. I think it's a great segue to go from this SSID configuration to go back over here to the overview page and just have a look at, right now here, the overview of all the access points. And then by going over to the clients page, we can actually see more detail about not only clients that kind of connected, but also those particular SSIDs. And at the top here, we can filter out or customize the view depending on what we want to see. For example, we can look at the last month's worth of data, and you'll see to the right there, we can filter out this view for particular SSIDs. So we can, for example, have a look at public Wi-Fi and see the throughput and total bandwidth usage over the past month. You can see that shown here, just over 70 gigabytes of data. And you can compare that through this graph with the total Wi-Fi usage. So you can see actually public Wi-Fi isn't the highest consumer. It doesn't take up the majority of the Wi-Fi bandwidth, at least in the past month. We can also filter out by particular clients, some of which might be whitelisted or blocked. And of course, we can see some other SSIDs, for example, Memphis Zoo right here, and have a look at their SSID usage. This makes up the majority. You'll see 3.4 terabytes, and in fact, the graph dominates there. And I've switched over to the Memphis Zoo SSID there. You can see this usage is 3.4 terabytes, and that usage from the SSID dominates the total throughput graph. And below, we can also see the list of devices that have connected. So again, here we can look at all of them together, or we can filter out for a particular SSID. Here on the Memphis Zoo Wi-Fi network, we have 139 devices that connected. But we can go back to public Wi-Fi and have a look at all the devices that connected there. 2,069. So even though they're not using as much bandwidth as the internal network, many, many more clients that have connected because, of course, of all the visitors that are coming in. And we can go through here and search for any particular client of interest. Maybe to start off, we can sort the whole list by the usage and see which devices are using the most bandwidth. Looks like the top users are getting close to 3 gigabytes of bandwidth usage in a given month. Some of these might be repeat visitors that maybe like to come to the zoo every weekend or something. We can also search for particular devices or device types, like the iPhones that Terry mentioned. Looks like we had 1,161 iPhones that connected to the network. Some of those using a fair amount of bandwidth too. You can see there almost 1.5 gigabytes of throughput. Not only Apple devices, of course, we can also have a look at Androids and see, again, yeah, Androids are taking up a fair amount of bandwidth too, also approaching 1.5 gigabytes of traffic, at least for the top consumers. So with this view, it's very easy to find how much bandwidth is being used by the public Wi-Fi SSID, how much is being used by the internal or maybe some of those vendor SSIDs. And we can also have an estimate of how many clients are connecting to the guest network. And that'll correlate with the record number of visitors that Terry mentioned near the beginning. And I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it sounds like quite an increase in attendance over the past year. We can also have a look at the infrastructure, and instead of just looking at the clients, we can have a look at the access points. And here again, we can see at a glance some important information, just as we saw in the overview page, and also some details in terms of usage and number of clients and things like that. Now these are a mix of indoor and outdoor access points, and all these that you see in green are in fact online and healthy. Their connection is very healthy right now. And if there are any that are disconnected or unavailable, they might show up in yellow or red or perhaps gray if they have been disconnected for a while. And we can also sort these by their usage and find which ones are handling the most data and the heaviest load. So we can see a few here like maintenance building, West Admin conference room, and this Eastgate security booth. Let's have a look at this one. This is an outdoor AP on MR66. And we could dive into any of these access points and have a look at their details. This one happens to be, as the name says, on the east side of the zoo. We can see that also with the satellite view that's shown here. It's flipped over to that, and I'll zoom in. And we can see that access point right there, as well as the nearby access points that are also part of the network overlaid onto that same map that we saw at the beginning. And the rest of the page shows us some configuration and status details, as well as some live tools that help us verify the connectivity and the status of this particular access point. We can monitor the load in real time, see how many clients are connected, see how much traffic is being passed through. Quite a bit of visibility into the network just by looking at that page, just by clicking on any of those APs. And finally, the last thing I'd like to show goes back to this load that we were talking about and how the users have connected and how users travel across the zoo and which APs they connect to the most. And we can see some of that through our presence analytics. Now, presence is our built-in location analytics, and presence uses the information of devices that connect as well as devices that simply are in the area of APs but don't necessarily connect. And in the heat map, we see a view of the patterns of usage and patterns of passers-by and visitors over time as people are near or approach the different access points. Now I'm going to switch over to the map views because it's a little bit easier to see. Looks like we have a satellite photo of some fall foliage, and it'll be a little bit easier to see here on the street map view or the regular map view. And I'm going to go back here to a date in the summer. Terry, I'm going to assume that some weekend in August was pretty busy for you just based on the summer activity. And what we'll see here are, again, the access points overlaid on the map, and around each, a heat map showing the concentration of visitors to or nearby each of those APs. And we can click the play button and see how this varies over time and how it changes. Of course, it'll fade out as the end of the day nears and as the zoo closes. We can also go back in time to look at, say, a weekday and see how people might be traveling through the zoo on a weekday compared to a weekend, and use this data to really see what's going on in terms of the visitors, the passersby, how long they're staying in the network, how often they come back, if we have a lot of first-time or one-time visitors, or if there are many repeat visitors. We can get that through presence analytics through some graphs that we also have built into the dashboard. A few questions came in about the dashboard and the demo, one of which is, are all the features integrated? Or, for example, do I have to buy a few of those, like, say, this Google Maps integration or the presence analytics? So all the features are integrated into the wireless solution. Everything that we've shown here so far is part of that system. There's only one license that is sold with the wireless AP. So each access point has a corresponding license, and then you get all these features that we've shown here and the things that Terry talked about, things like the guest Wi-Fi, the ability to deploy very quickly, the summary and the usage charts that show us how much each of those networks are being used, and the load, and so on. So Terry, thank you very much for giving us a little bit of time to and letting us show your network. There are a few questions that are coming in for you. I'd like to pause on those just for a moment, just wrap up the rest of the material that we had, and then go back. We are collecting those questions, so if you have any questions still for Terry, now is a great time to type them in. So to wrap up the presentation, I'd just like to give you an overview of the Cisco Meraki product line. We've been talking mostly about the Wi-Fi solution. There are 6 models, including indoor and outdoor, both value priced and high performance. Terry's network, in fact, was a great example of how both of these indoor and outdoor types of APs can simply coexist in a single network. They can mesh together. It doesn't matter if they're indoor or outdoor. They'll all work in the same way, and you can enable things like those vendor SSIDs, security, look at the guest traffic and public Wi-Fi usage, and so on, regardless of how you mix and match those. They are enterprise class APs, so they include all the features that we showed there in the demo, as well as some other ones. I saw that a few came in about things like floor plans. Can you have floor plans? Yes, you can. Can you have group policies by device type? Yes, you can. The APs also automatically manage their own RF transmit power. You can override that manually if you wish. Again, all of that is included as part of the wireless system. Meraki's MX security appliances are designed to be a complete networking and security solution in a single device. So you can think of this as a unified threat management or UTM type of device. And because of that, they have a whole list of features that can do things like layer 3 through layer 7 firewall, enable site-to-site VPN if you have multiple locations, filter content to block unwanted or undesirable web content from being accessible by your users, and even do things like intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, security filtering, and much, much more. Terry mentioned the switches that are being rolled out in the Memphis Zoo. He mentioned specifically one of the smaller ones, which is shown at the top there. That's an 8-port access switch. We also have access switches in 24 and 48-port configurations with and without PoE, and in layer 2 and layer 3 configurations. And at the bottom of that photograph are shown some 24 and 48-port aggregation switches. So those are 10 gigabit SFP plus aggregation switches. And all of these switches are managed through the cloud. We didn't have a time to go into Terry's switching network, but as he mentioned before, they're managed through the same interface, that same dashboard. You don't even have to log out to go to the switch infrastructure and perform the monitoring, the configuration, in the same way that you would the wireless system. And finally, Systems Manager is our cloud-based MDM solution. It controls mobile devices like iOS and Android, also desktop platforms like Mac and PC. It's a little bit different because there's no hardware or on-site appliance required. You simply open a Systems Manager account. You can enroll your devices and start doing things like monitoring and managing your inventory, enforcing security and passcode restrictions, or disallowing certain functions on the device. You can also roll out connectivity settings to your devices under management, things like Wi-Fi and VPN, ActiveSync for email settings, and in that way make a configuration once in the dashboard and roll it out to many, many devices. Now, if you're curious to try out some of the things that we've shown here, Terry mentioned he tried out some wireless APs early on. You're welcome to take advantage of our free evaluation program. It'll let you try out the Meraki hardware in your environment. You can get it set up in just about 10 or 15 minutes. And if you have any questions about configuration or integration with what you already have, we're happy to make that available to you. All of this is at no cost. If you like what you see, you can buy it. If it's not the right fit for you, you can simply send it back to us. And if you want to find out more, I definitely encourage you to talk to your Cisco Meraki rep about that. So that's the end of our presentation. We do have a few minutes for Q&A, and we have some questions for Terry. Terry, if you don't mind, I'm just going to ask you a few of these that have been coming in over the Q&A. And a few of them relate to kind of the internal infrastructure. How many PCs do you have in your network?
We have 125 or so.
Great. In regards to the deployment, we talked earlier about the deployment of the Meraki infrastructure. What was the hardest part about that?
For us, the hardest part was where we needed what. We had a very peculiar, we do have a fiber backbone here. It's a mix of single mode and multi-mode. It's just, again, time and not a lot of continuity with an IT staff. So the challenge became identifying what switches I needed where do I need a 48 port, where do I need a fiber connector, where do I need that fiber to be multi-mode, where do I need that fiber to be single mode. You know, just the typical things that you're going to run into. So again, going back to the ease of the Meraki, all I had to determine is what I needed where, and quite literally, when I sat down with Cisco, and if you looked at what I was going to purchase and what I've deployed to this point, the roadmap would be totally different. It is totally different because we are, one of the things about the Meraki is we were able to use it to identify where we had bad networking. And so instead of two switches going in one location, I actually backed down the road a little bit, put one switch in there, and then replaced the one I was going to replace with two, you know, with just one at that point. So it was more of our cabling infrastructure that was my challenge, and not, you know, configuring and deploying the Merakis themselves. Like we've already touched on, you go into the cloud, you're looking at your Meraki. You don't have to know CLI or anything like that to configure that switch. You plug it in, you see it come live in the cloud, you drop your configuration on each port right then and there, and then you go put it in where you're going to use it and plug in your Ethernet or fiber to the associated ports that you've configured, and you're done.
Great. That actually leads to another question that a few people asked about, and that's how does this integrate with your core network? I think you kind of touched on that with the previous question.
How does the switches integrate with my core?
Well, how do yeah, the Meraki switches, but also the Wi-Fi APs?
Well, I mean, your switches have become my core in my server room. We just recently replaced our firewall on an emergency basis with a sonic wall just before this, about 2 months or so before this switch deployment was going to take place. But from that point, I mean, when you come through my sonic wall, you're hitting a Meraki 48-port switch. And so, I mean, my goal was, at the point of deployment, was Meraki was going to be my core. And, you know, it just feeds out to, I mean, the access points just act like they did when I first had installed them against my AP switches. They were just, you know, remote accesses into the network. And so now it just has extended what Meraki has here, both a core of, you know, fiber-based Ethernet switches and then out to the access points.
Great, that makes total sense. Thank you, Terry. We're just about out of time at the top of the hour, actually, so we're going to wrap it up. Terry, thank you once again for sharing all this about your deployment and the exciting applications that you're supporting at Memphis Zoo. We do appreciate it.
Yes, sir. No trouble.
And thanks to all of you for attending. Before you leave, actually, I would like to ask one more favor of you, and that's if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of feedback about the webinar. You'll see that in a survey that will pop up as you exit the webinar. And this is just an opportunity for us to hear what you thought about the webinar, what you think might improve it in the future, or what other kinds of content you'd like to see. 2 questions only, so it's quite short. Again, you'll see that as you exit the webinar. So again, thanks everyone for attending, and I hope all of you have a fantastic day.